How we doing? Fox again for Sound Design Tutorials. Another massive bass patch today. It's going to be a drum and bass patch. It's sort of a pulsing driven drum and bass patch. Standard procedure. I'll show you how I made the sound once I've made you listen to the sound. So here it is on its own. There it is, nice deep pulsing drum and bass. So yeah, I'll go ahead and create a new instance of Massive. Oscillator 1, I kept on square saw wave as it comes as standard. Pull the wavetable position back to about 1 o'clock, pitched it down 1 octave, and offset it ever so slightly to 12.03. Kept the intensity at full, pull it back slightly actually to about 2 o'clock, amp at full, and route it to filter 1 only. I'm only going to be using one filter for this sound. Oscillator 2, I changed to a sine square, which is another basic waveform. Pull the wavetable position all the way back to a sine. This is going to give us the sort of B for the sound. Turn it on, pitched it down again, -12. Offset this one the other way to 11.92. Intensity I pulled back to about 3 o'clock. Amp on full, route this one to filter 1 as well. I'll show the sound just these two oscillators. Nothing interesting at the minute. I did use an envelope to modulate the wavetable position of oscillator 1 and 2. I'll use any envelope you want. You can use any envelope you want, sorry. I used envelope 2 for this. Click and drag this to the first modulation box of the wavetable for 1 and 2. Push this one round to maximum. The second one, push it round to about 2 o'clock. We'll set this envelope up now, as I say, because I use it for quite a few things throughout the patch. Pulled the attack back to ultimate 0 and then pushed it up just 2 tiny little clicks. Decay level back to about in between 8 and 9 o'clock, and the level round to about just before 3 o'clock. Pulled the release back from its original position to about 8 o'clock. So yeah, a little bit of envelope. Just need to check this box, trigger 0 reset. That means it's going to restart this envelope every time a key is pressed. I also had the gate on, yeah, that's okay. So yeah, oscillator 3 I used as well. I used something a little bit different this time. I used a digital hybrid one just to make the sound a little bit more modern rather than just 2 analog waveforms. I used DigiCook 1, pitched it down again 1 octave, offset this one to 0.05. Wavetable position, pull it back to about 8 o'clock. Intensity round to 0. The amp on full, and route this to filter 1. We're going to change this to a formant. I'll play it as it is, and then I'll change it to a formant and show you the difference it makes. As you can hear, this intensity knob, when you're using a formant in this box here, it also lets you, it's like choosing the sort of vowel that you want it to do and how deep it is. The further to the left, the deeper it is. Obviously, because it's a bass patch, it helps just thicken the sound up, make it sound a bit more beefier. So yeah, route this to filter 1 as well, amp round to full. I use an LFO to modulate the wavetable position on this. Again, you can use any one you want. I used LFO 5. Click this cross, drag it to the first modulation box of the wavetable position for oscillator 3. Click it and pull it back to ultimate 0. I didn't want it to go any further than 0. You can tell if you're going further than 0 because a little line appears and then it's as if it carries on. Then you can make it bounce back further the other way. Make sure it's just on 0 so you can't see that extra little bit of green sticking out the bottom. So yeah, that's it. We'll set LFO 5 up. I changed it to a triangle wave, which is this last box. Pushed the crossfade curve to the top, so we're only going to be using this one. I synced it, set the rate to 1/4. That means it's going to do 4 beats, 4 pulses every bar, so it's bang on every beat. I changed the starting position of the waveform. If you drag on this little arrows here, left and right, you can change where the triangle waveform starts on the LFO. I had it so that you could just see the start of a new triangle creeping in, and this point was just before the first box. I'll back the decay of the internal envelope for this LFO off to about 1/4 of the way. So yeah, you're not really going to be able to hear this modulation on this at the minute. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, when I use it to modulate other effects later on in the patch, you're going to be it's what gives it that pulsing effect. So yeah, all 3 oscillators. So yeah, that's it for the 3 basic oscillators. I did use a modulation oscillator. I used it for phase via oscillator 1. I pitched it down 1 octave again, and I set it to the same number as oscillator 2, so it was minus 11.92. I pulled the phase to just above 0, about 2 of those little white pips shown. I used envelope 2 again to open this up pretty quickly. Drag it over, click on it, push it round to about 2 o'clock. I also used filter FM of oscillator 2, and I pulled this back to about in between 8 and 9 o'clock. So yeah, mod oscillator. Okay, I didn't use any noise for this, so you can go ahead and turn it off. I did use feedback. I routed the feedback to filter 2. And although I'm only using 1 filter for this, I set the mix between the 2 filters to dead center, so it passes. It's like, I wouldn't say it's like passing it through nothing, but it does. I'll show you what it does later on. It does make a difference. Even though I'm using 1 filter, if you set the mix between 1 or 2, you can hear the difference. Set this to serial as well, so it's going to run from filter 1 into filter 2. So yeah, feedback, turned it on, pushed the amp all the way around to about 2 o'clock, and I set it to filter 2. Okay, we'll go ahead with the inserts now. Insert 1 is a parabolic shaper. I pretty much use this on all my bass patches. It just enhances all the high-end frequencies if you have any. Pull it back to about dry wet to about 10 and drive around to about 9. Insert 2 is a sine shaper, which is a form of distortion, just to help to grit the sound up a bit. Dry wet to nothing. Drive back to about in between 8 and 9. I use envelope 2 again for both of these, the dry wet and the drive. Push the dry out around to about 10, the drive around to about 10 as well. So yeah, 2 insert effects. I'm going to take that and I'm changing this patch as I'm going along now. I don't like that envelope on the phase, it's not needed, so we'll turn it off and we'll push the phase round to about 8 o'clock. It's phasing on its own anyway, so you don't really need that. So yes, 2 inserts done. We'll go ahead and set up the voicing now just to make the sound a bit thicker. So yeah, in the voicing section, I'll set the unison to 4. Monophonic because it's a bass patch. I modulated all 3 of these, the pitch cutoff, wavetable position and pan position, so you can click all 3 of them on. I don't normally mess around with these numbers on the pitch cutoff. For some reason I have on this, so I ain't going to argue with myself. I changed it to 0.068. I used a LFO to modulate this, LFO 5, the same one what we used earlier. Click on it, pushed it up so you could just see one of the little notches coming through, and then I modulated it back so you can just see an extra little green box clicking. Changed it to chord, wavetable position, kept it at 0. I used the LFO again, pushed this one up to about a quarter of the way. Pan position, set it dead on mono. I use the LFO again, and I modulate this all the way to maximum. This is going to make a drastic difference to the sound now, so we've still got no filters in play. This is really what tames the sound now and gives it that really deep sort of sound. So filter 1, standard. I always use a low pass 2 when I'm doing bass patches. Set the cutoff to dead 12 o'clock. I use an envelope and a LFO to do this. And the LFO 5, what we did in the first modulation box, pulled it back slightly to about 11. Envelope 2, the same one we've used in earlier. Click it in, push this round the opposite way, in between 12 and 1 o'clock. What effect this has when you use an envelope and an LFO, the envelope takes control of the cutoff frequency and moves it over the designated time that you got with your attack, and the LFO keeps bouncing it as the envelope's moving it, which gives it even more movement. So yeah, that's the only filter that I use. Resonance I pulled all the way down to 0. Volume for the filter up to maximum. I already told you earlier we're going to mix this between 1 or 2. I'll show you what it sounds like with the 1 filter on, and then I'll push this mix in and out, and I'll change the series and parallel so you can see what effect it has. Forgot to turn the volume of filter 2 up, which might help. So yeah. Some people might like it a bit better actually. As you push it towards the parallel side, it means that half the signal's running through the filter untouched and half of it is running through the filter there. So you can do this to taste. You can even assign the LFO to this to give it a bit of movement as well if you wanted. I personally liked it just on the serial mode, so it runs through the low pass and then through the filter. So yeah, I'll just check the routing section, make sure I didn't change anything around. I don't think I did. Oh yeah, I did actually. I changed insert 1 to this point here, and insert 2 to come here after oscillator 1. Feedback at the end. I also changed the routing of all these oscillators as well. Click on these 3 boxes, so oscillator 1 is going to run through 2, 3, the noise, and then the feedback straight to the EQ, but we need to change this EQ to FX1 first. So it's going to go through the FXs, through FX1, through FX2, and into the EQ. So yeah, FX1, I used a bit of distortion again. I used the Brauner tube. Dry wet for this I set at about 11 o'clock. Drive a bit before about 10 o'clock. FX2, dimension expander. I'll show you it with the Brauner tube on its own actually. Maybe back the dry wet of that off a bit. I mean, it can start to get a little bit distorted. It can if you use too much of this. About there's fine, just before 9 o'clock. FX2, as I say, a dimension expander. This is going to make a drastic difference to the sound as well. I'll set it up, then I'll turn it on and off so you can hear what difference it makes. Brilliant effect this is. Dry wet, just after 9, size dead centre. So without it, with you really need to watch your levels when you're adding these effects at the end of the chain, because as you can see, without them, I'll push the volume back to where it was, and as you add them, it was clipping. As soon as I add that dimension expander, it starts clipping, so just back the master volume off as you add the dimension expander. Finally, a bit of EQ. I've boosted the low shelf, as you would imagine, it's a bass patch. Push it to about 1 o'clock, the boost round to about the same, pull the frequency back to about 10, and the high shelf back to about 10 as well. This is a standard setup for me pretty much when I do a bass patch. It is, in effect, boosting the lows and cutting the highs out. So yeah, that is it for the patch. I'll show you it again quick. I lied. I used the LFO to modulate the pan as well. Real simple effect, but it helps make things sound a little bit better. Click it on the first modulation box, kept it on dead center, and I modulated it round to about 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock respectively in each direction. Envelope 4. I did back the attack of this off as well, so it wasn't so severe. Back it off to about 10 o'clock. The release I kept as it was, decay where it was, and the decay level. I modulated the decay level with this LFO as well, which is strange. It's a new one for me. 5, decay level, ever so slightly. Gives a bit more movement. Modulating this decay level is in effect like when you put one of these morph lines on and you loop it. I mean, some of these have got some crazy shapes, if I can find one. There we go. So putting an LFO on the decay level is in effect putting a wobble on this like these do. Sometimes it's a bit simpler to put an LFO on it than it is to use any of these morph boxes. But yeah, that's it for the sound. So I did a little tutorial earlier on in the week to show you how you can use breaks to spice up your drum loops. This is a drum loop that I made. So yeah, I'll just play it through with that so you can see what you can do with the sound. There we have it. Driven, pulsing drum and bass patch with Massive. Real straightforward. It looks a bit complicated with this modulation, but it's the LFO doing all the work really that gives it that pulsing sort of bouncing feel. As always, please subscribe if you enjoyed this. As I always keep saying, it really just spur me on to do more of these in my spare time. Our Facebook page and Google Plus page, if you want to check them out, which has all the videos that I do, is Sound Design Tutorials. My YouTube page is www.youtube.com/MrMFox22 if you want to subscribe. Okay, thanks again. Cheers.